Eleanor Price and Daniel Ward thought the abandoned inn would be the perfect place to document their ghost hunting channel. But the moment Eleanor pressed record, the camera captured someone standing behind Daniel, someone neither of them could see. The first time I felt it, I was alone in the old farmhouse, the kind of place that seemed forgotten by time itself. The air smelled of damp wood, mold, and something older, like the earth had soaked through the foundation. I remember pausing at the doorway, holding my breath as though stepping inside meant I was trespassing in a place that didn't want me there. The silence was heavy, so complete that I could hear the faint thump of my own heart echoing in my ears. I thought about turning back, but some pull, something I couldn't explain, forced me forward. My shoes pressed against the warped floorboards, each step groaning as though the house was reacting to my weight. I told myself it was normal, just an old building settling, but the sound was different. The boards creaked in rhythm, like footsteps following close behind me. I tried to ignore it, moving quickly down the hallway, but with every movement I felt a presence just out of sight, just behind my shoulder. The walls were lined with portraits of a family I didn't know. Dust clouded the glass, but the eyes beneath were clear and sharp, painted with such detail that they felt alive. The father's stern gaze, the mother's faint smile, the children's vacant stares, they all seemed to follow me no matter where I moved. It was the mother's portrait that held me the longest. She was painted in a soft blue dress, her expression calm, almost a calm. But as I stepped closer, I swore her eyes flickered, shifting from serenity to fear. I blinked hard, convincing myself it was my imagination. But when I looked again, her mouth seemed to hang slightly open, as though she was about to scream. The air grew colder. I rubbed my arms, but the chill wasn't natural. It sank beneath the skin, clinging to my bones. That's when I heard a faint scratching, like fingernails dragging down wood. At first it was distant, somewhere deep within the walls, but then it moved. I froze, straining to listen, and the scratching slid closer, slow and deliberate, tracing its way along the hallway. My breath caught as the sound stopped directly behind the wall I leaned against. I pressed my ear to the surface, half expecting to hear rodents or wind. Instead, I heard breathing, slow, ragged, wet, like someone forcing air through waterlogged lungs. The sound was so close, I felt the vibration against the wood. My skin prickled and my stomach tightened as I stumbled back. I turned to run, but something in the corner of my vision made me stop. The hallway itself was wrong. When I first entered it was short, maybe 6 or 7 steps long, but now it stretched farther than my eyes could follow. The light faded into a murky darkness at the end, as if the house had stretched its spine, creating more space where none existed. I took a shaky step forward, my instincts screaming at me not to, and that's when I noticed the portraits again. Each one was different now. The father's stern expression had twisted into a snarl, teeth bared as though he was growling. The children no longer looked vacant. Their eyes were wide, their pupils blown large as if consumed by terror. But it was the mother who made my blood run cold. She no longer wore that faint smile. Her mouth was gaping wide, lips cracked, jaw stretched unnaturally, like she was frozen mid-scream. I staggered backward, my chest tightening. My eyes caught something in her painting, something that didn't belong. Reflected in the glass frame of her portrait was a figure standing directly behind me. A tall, shadowy silhouette, distorted as though its body was bending at wrong angles. My throat closed as I whipped around, but the hallway was empty, nothing there but dust and shadows. Still, the air behind me pressed heavy, as though something unseen hovered just a breath away from touching me. I wanted to leave, but the hallway didn't end anymore. It stretched into nothingness, the lights flickering, the air thick with a suffocating pressure that made every breath harder to take. I thought I heard a whisper then, faint but sharp, curling into my ear from nowhere. Not words I could understand, just a sound like wind passing through broken glass. My vision swam, and for a moment I swore the walls pulsed, moving in and out like the lungs of something alive. As I forced myself to turn back toward the entrance, I noticed the portrait frames again. One by one, the glass began to crack, thin lines spiderwebbing outward. The sound was sharp, brittle, echoing in the silence. I couldn't move. I watched as each portrait shattered, shards falling to the floor, yet the paintings inside remained untouched. Their eyes gleamed brighter, more alive than ever, locked onto me with an intensity that burned. My pulse roared in my ears as I stumbled backward, my heel catching on a loose board. I caught myself, my hand shaking, and glanced once more at the mother's portrait. She wasn't just screaming anymore. Her painted hand was pressed against the inside of the canvas, pushing outward, straining against the barrier as though she was trying to crawl through. And behind her, in the blurred background of the painting, the shadow figure loomed closer, its head bent unnaturally low, its faceless shape staring straight into me. That was when I realized the house wasn't abandoned. It had been waiting. And the moment I stepped through the door, it had begun to breathe me in. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, the image of the mother's stretched face clawed its way into my mind. The silence of the farmhouse was not silence anymore, it carried weight, pressing down on me, making every creak of the old beams above sound like footsteps creeping closer. I sat in the corner of the upstairs room, knees pulled to my chest, staring at the door. My eyes burned from staying open too long, but I knew the moment I let them close, something would come for me. When the pale light of morning finally seeped through the dirty window, I thought I had survived the worst of it. I told myself that the horrors of the night belonged to the dark, that daylight would drive them away. But when I walked down to the front door and tried to leave, reality broke me. The door would not move. I unlocked it, pulled hard with both hands, but it refused to give. My knuckles turned white, my arms trembled with effort, yet the wood stayed still as stone. Even the windows were the same. I tried them one by one, some nailed shut, others painted over, none of them willing to open. The house had locked me inside. I stood in the hallway, chest heaving, mind racing. I wanted to scream for help, but who would hear me out here? The farmhouse sat alone, far from neighbors, far from roads. The silence answered for me. I wasn't trapped with nothing, I was trapped with it. The kitchen was the only place that felt somewhat normal, at least at first glance. A table with cracked legs, cabinets swollen with damp, and a Bible resting on the counter, its cover thick with dust. Something about it pulled me closer. I opened it carefully. The pages yellowed and brittle beneath my fingers. In the center, a single verse had been underlined with such force that the pen had almost torn the paper. The words read, "They shall not escape." My hands shook as I closed the book, bile rising in my throat. Who had underlined it? Why those words? That was when the smell reached me. It started faint, like something burnt, but quickly grew into a stench so thick it coated the back of my throat. Burnt flesh mixed with rot, clinging to the air, filling every breath with decay. It didn't come from one place, it was everywhere, as though the entire house was rotting from the inside out. My stomach twisted and I gagged, stumbling back toward the hallway, desperate for clean air. But when I entered the living room, my blood froze. The furniture was wrong. The night before, the room had been scattered with broken chairs and an overturned table. But now the chairs stood upright, arranged in a perfect circle in the center of the room. They all faced inward, toward the middle, as if waiting for someone to sit. In that circle on the dusty wooden floor lay a pile of bones. They were small, delicate, brittle with age. My mind refused to accept what I was seeing, but deep down, I knew. These weren't animal bones. They were human. Tiny ribs, fragile skull fragments, the remains of children. My chest tightened, my knees weak as I staggered backward. The air was heavy with their presence, the smell stronger here, almost unbearable. I tried to tell myself it was just a trick, some sick illusion the house was playing on me. I closed my eyes, counting to 3, and opened them again. The bones were still there. Worse, they had shifted. One of the smaller bones, an arm, maybe twitched against the floorboards, then another. My heart skipped a beat as the pile quivered, the bones shifting slightly, scraping against one another as though something underneath was trying to push its way out. The air grew colder, my breath visible in shaky clouds. I couldn't move. The bones twitched again, this time more violently, rattling against the wood. A hollow sound filled the room, sharp and piercing, as if the bones themselves were trying to speak. The circle of chairs scraped slightly against the floor, tightening inward as though being drawn closer to whatever was trying to rise from the center. I stumbled backward, my foot slamming into the doorframe, and the sound seemed to awaken the pile completely. The rattling grew louder, the bones shifting faster, almost pulsing like a living thing. I thought I saw a shape beginning to form, a crooked spine bending upward, a skull tilting toward me. My body moved before my mind could. I bolted from the room, heart slamming against my ribs, tears blurring my vision. I didn't stop running until I reached the far end of the hall, pressing my back to the wall, gasping for air. The silence returned slowly, smothering the sound of my heartbeat. For a moment I thought I had imagined it all, that the horror had been a trick of exhaustion. But then I realized the smell was stronger than ever, curling through the hallway, clinging to my clothes, filling my lungs. And beneath the smell, faint but clear, came the sound of bone scraping against bone, as though the thing in the living room wasn't done building itself yet. I stopped eating after that day. The hunger clawed at my stomach, but fear pressed harder, heavier, making food feel pointless. Every step I took through the house felt like walking deeper into something alive, something that was studying me as much as I was trying to understand it. The walls groaned like tired lungs, the ceilings shifted as though settling over me, and each corner seemed sharper, darker, waiting for me to turn. Sleep was no relief either. When I finally gave in to exhaustion, I woke with burning scratches across my arms and legs. Raw wounds carved into my skin as if unseen hands had dragged their nails over me in the night. The scratching sounds grew worse. They weren't hidden in the walls anymore. They moved openly above me, circling across the ceiling, dragging down the sides of the hallway. Sometimes it was slow and measured, as though it was pacing. Other times it was frantic, clawing wildly, like something trapped inside was desperate to break through. I couldn't escape it. No matter where I stood, the sound followed, pressing closer, almost brushing against my skin. Mirrors became my greatest fear. At first I avoided them because I didn't want to see how pale and hollow I had become. But soon I realized it wasn't my reflection that scared me. It was what the reflection did when I wasn't moving. In the hallway mirror, my reflection lagged behind, its movements slower, deliberate, and wrong. Sometimes it smiled when my lips didn't move. Other times its head turned ever so slightly as though it were listening to something I couldn't hear. I smashed the first mirror with my fists, cutting my hand open, but it didn't help. The shards on the floor showed dozens of tiny versions of me, each one grinning with teeth too sharp. The bathroom mirror was worse. Steam from the leaking pipes coated the glass, and when I wiped it away, the face staring back wasn't mine at all. It looked like me, but drained of life, skin stretched thin over bones, hollow eyes sinking into shadows. Its lips moved, whispering soundless words I couldn't hear but somehow understood. Let us in. My stomach turned to ice as I stumbled back, but the reflection didn't move with me. It stayed pressed against the glass, its face flattening against it, as though it was trying to push through. I thought the house couldn't hurt me any more than it already had, but I was wrong. The attic called to me. I can't explain it, but something above tugged at me, like an invisible thread pulling my chest upward. My body resisted, every part of me screaming not to climb that ladder, but my legs carried me anyway. When I pulled the string, dust rained down like ash, coating my skin, and the ladder unfolded with a groan that echoed too long. The attic was black, thick with shadows that swallowed my flashlight beam. I climbed slowly, every step an effort, the air growing colder the higher I went. My breath puffed into clouds, my body trembling as though the house was freezing me from the inside out. At the top, I shone the light into the darkness, and my stomach dropped. Children, dozens of them, their small bodies crouched in the far corners, faces pale and still. Their clothes were torn, rotting, and their eyes reflected faintly in the beam like dull glass. At first I thought they were dolls or corpses, but then they turned. Slowly, in unison, every head shifted toward me. Their mouths were sewn shut with thick black thread, jagged stitches pulling their lips together. They raised their hands, reaching for me, the air around them thick with the sound of muffled cries trapped behind sewn flesh. I froze, my chest burning as I forgot how to breathe. Their tiny fingers twitched, curling as if beckoning me closer. The sound of the thread straining filled the attic, soft tearing noises as though their mouths were trying to rip open just to scream. My flashlight flickered, and for a moment the beam caught their eyes, glowing faintly, unnatural and endless. The ladder shook beneath me as though someone was climbing after me, though I was the only one there. My pulse thundered in my skull, sweat freezing against my skin. I tried to move, to step back down, but my legs were heavy, locked in place. The children rose slowly, their heads tilting at unnatural angles, their bodies jerking like broken puppets. They reached out again, and though I was across the attic, I felt their hands brush against me, cold, fragile, yet suffocating. When I finally broke free of my paralysis, I stumbled down the ladder, nearly falling. I yanked the string, slamming the attic door shut above me, but the sound didn't comfort me, because even after it was closed, I could still hear them moving, dragging their small feet across the floorboards, their muffled cries growing louder, pressing through the ceiling. And when I looked at my arms, I realized I wasn't alone anymore. Small, delicate fingerprints, dozens of them, were pressed into my skin, already bruising black. I tried to run, but running inside this house meant nothing. Corridors shifted under my feet, stretching longer, curving into places I had never seen before. Doors slammed before I could reach them, as if unseen hands were always one step ahead of me, rearranging the maze to keep me inside. Every window I found reflected nothing but my own frantic face, but even that wasn't right anymore. My reflection lagged, grinning when I wasn't, its eyes sinking deeper into dark hollows with every glance. The house was no longer just around me, it was inside me, breathing with me, forcing me to lose myself in its endless pulse. I ended up in the kitchen again, though I couldn't remember walking there. The air was thicker here, choked with the sour stench of rot and something chemical, like burnt oil. The Bible still lay on the counter where I had left it, but it wasn't the same. When I opened it again, the pages were filled with frantic handwriting. I recognized the script instantly. It was mine. Every page carried words I had never written, lines carved deep into the paper as though I had scratched them in with a knife instead of ink. The sentences repeated, over and over, overlapping each other in frantic spirals. She is coming. She knows your name. Don't look at her eyes. I dropped the book, but the words stayed in my head, looping louder, until they didn't sound like mine anymore. They came from something else, something that had been whispering inside me since I entered the house. My knees buckled, and I pressed my hands against my ears, but it didn't help. The voices weren't outside of me, they were buried deep inside, filling my skull, humming beneath my skin like a parasite. When the lights flickered above, the sound in my head spiked. The chairs in the living room scraped across the floor, dragging closer to the circle. My heart thudded as I realized the pile of bones I had seen before was gone. The chairs still stood in their perfect ring, but the space in the center was empty now, waiting. My stomach clenched as I backed away, but the whispers pushed me forward, forcing my legs to move toward the circle as though I had no choice. The air grew colder with every step. I could see my breath clouding the room, feel the prick of ice creeping across my skin. My head throbbed as if my skull would split open. I wanted to turn, to run, but the house tightened around me, stretching shadows across the walls until they closed me in. The whispers grew louder, weaving into a chant I couldn't understand. It felt old, heavy, like something pulled from the bottom of the earth. The circle of chairs trembled, their legs screeching against the wood, and then they froze. In the center, the air shimmered, as though heat waves rose from the floor, but it wasn't heat, it was cold. My breath thickened, frosting in the air, and my body locked. The space seemed to peel open, revealing something that shouldn't exist. When the light steadied again, she was there, the woman from the portrait. She stood in the center of the circle, her body shifting between paint and flesh, dripping with oil and blood. Her blue dress clung to her like soaked cloth, her head tilted sharply to one side as though her neck had snapped. Her mouth hung open in a stretched scream that never ended, her jaw unhinged beyond what was human. Her eyes were worse, or rather, the absence of them. Where her eyes should have been were dark, hollow pits, gouged deep into a skull, but somehow I knew she could see me. I felt her gaze burning into me, sharper than any blade. My chest seized, my body trembling under that eyeless stare. The whispers inside me turned frantic, screaming at once, don't look at her eyes, but I couldn't stop myself. The longer I stood frozen, the stronger the pull became. I felt her dragging me closer without moving, as if my bones were bending toward her, drawn into her hollow sockets. The house groaned around us, every wall shuddering, as though it too was afraid of her. The shadows twisted across the ceiling, crawling down toward me, wrapping around my arms and legs like chains. My mouth opened to scream, but the sound that came out wasn't mine. It was deeper, guttural, a roar that shook the air. My throat burned, stretched wide, my voice used by something else. She tilted her head farther, the soundless scream widening, her body bending in impossible ways. I thought she was moving toward me, but when I blinked, she was already closer, her rotted skin dripping, her eyeless face inches from mine. The smell of burnt flesh choked me, and I gagged, tears burning my eyes. When the lights flickered again, she was gone. The circle of chairs stood empty, silent. But the air hadn't lightened. The whispers hadn't stopped, and when I looked down, I realized my hands were no longer mine. The skin was stretched thin, pale, and painted in oils, as though I too was becoming part of the portrait. I don't know how long it has been. Time has dissolved into something shapeless inside this house. The sun never rises here anymore. The windows glow with a dull gray light, but it never changes, never shifts into night or day. I walk through endless corridors that fold into themselves, and no matter where I start, I always end up back in the same place. The house is not only a prison, it is a loop, a labyrinth that stretches into infinity. My body has grown weak, my hands tremble constantly, and when I press them against my chest, I feel the uneven thud of a heart that doesn't quite sound like mine anymore. The whispers never leave me now. In the beginning, they came from the walls, from the ceilings, from the shadows. Now they bloom from inside my head, their voices tangled with my own thoughts until I can't tell which belong to me. They don't speak in one voice, but in hundreds, layered and overlapping, a chorus that shifts between pleading and command. They whisper names I've never heard, names of people who I feel will one day walk these halls. They whisper dates that haven't come yet, each one heavy with the certainty of death. I try to cover my ears, but it doesn't matter. My body is no longer enough to shut them out. Sometimes I see the children again. They appear in flashes, in doorways and corners, their mouths still bound by black thread, their hollow eyes wide with a silent urgency. Their hands reach for me, and I don't recoil anymore. When their tiny fingers brush against my skin, the cold burns like frostbite, but I feel their intent. They are not trying to hurt me. They are trying to tell me something, though the stitches hold their words inside. Sometimes their jaws quiver, pulling at the thread, until it cuts deeper into their faces. I want to help them. I want to rip the thread away, to hear what they have been forced to hold inside. But each time I move closer, the shadows push me back. The house will not allow it. I think I have stopped resisting. At first I told myself I would survive, that I would find a way out. Now I understand that was a lie. I whispered to keep myself sane. There is no outside anymore. The house has folded around me, and I am inside its lungs, inside its veins. It doesn't matter if I run, if I scream, if I pray. It has me. I was chosen, or perhaps I wandered in by accident, but that no longer matters. The moment I stepped through the door, the house claimed me. Last night, or what I think was last night, I found another Bible. This one was in the attic, beneath the dust and the broken toys of children long gone. Its pages were damp, the ink smudged, but one sentence was clear, written in thick black letters that bled through the paper. It read, "Tell them the story so they will come." My stomach knotted as I traced the words with my trembling fingers. I didn't write them. I know I didn't. Yet my handwriting was there, jagged and frantic. The whispers grew louder after I read it, filling every part of me, pressing behind my eyes until I thought my skull would crack. They told me to remember every detail, to describe every sound, every shadow, every face that watched me from the walls. They told me I must carry it, pass it on, so others will follow. My throat burned, my hands ached, but I wrote anyway. I wrote because the voices said if I didn't, the house would never let me rest, never let me stop. I feel it changing me now. My skin is stretched tighter, my reflection no longer mine. When I catch myself in the glass, I see the faint shimmer of paint covering my face, colors bleeding through my skin, as though I am being remade into something else. The air clings to me, thick with oil and ash, and I can't tell if I am breathing or if the house is breathing through me. The scratching has returned, but it is not in the walls anymore. It is under my skin, crawling across my bones, digging into my skull. Sometimes I clawed my arms, tearing open the flesh, convinced I will find nails dragging beneath the surface. The bruises bloom in the shape of hands, dozens of tiny fingerprints pressing deeper each day. I think of the portraits often, how they changed when I entered, how their eyes followed me with silent knowledge. I wonder now if they were not just paintings of those who lived here, but those who came before me, those who wrote the same words, who told the same story, who became part of the house when their voices faded. And as I write this, my body trembling, the whispers coil tighter, wrapping themselves around the final pieces of me. They tell me that the story is almost ready, that it is complete. They tell me someone will hear it, someone will read it, someone will come, and when they do, I will no longer be here to warn them. I will already be waiting in the walls,